You are here to learn about the legal and business risks of AI. What do product people need to know? Thanks to our sponsors, especially that lovely sponsor at the top, Pragmatic. All right, so objectives and overviews. What do I hope you leave this presentation knowing? So we're going to talk about the risks. We're going to talk about some best practices. One of the big reasons I wanted to talk about this is because this is an inflection point, not only just for the larger technology industry, but especially for product people. So I want you to really capture and really seize this moment to help it boost your career. But in order to do that, there's certain risks that you need to be aware of. I've seen so many product managers that are hyped about all these cool things that AI could do. I haven't heard any of them talk about like, oh, but it may cause this with my product or this or that. So I just wanted to be, the kind of voice of reason, be like, yes, it is great, but think about a few of these things. All right, so what am I going to be covering? Obviously the areas that product managers need to know. I also want to really encourage you to be using AI on a daily basis. Literally, you should be using it on a daily basis. I'm going to show you some good places to start because it's so hard. Like literally every month, there's 1,000 new products being released that are powered by these new AI tools. So how do you keep up with that? Well, I'm going to show you a little bit about that. But let's get into the fun stuff. You guys came here to you guys love just diving into the nitty-gritty of legal and compliance, don't you? Well, this is something that most of you save for like Friday nights, to dive into law books, but we'll go through this pretty quickly because this is kind of like boring stuff, but it's important. So in terms of like contracts, some things you need to think about when it comes to AI. If you're using AI tools within your product, you need to think about, well, does that violate any agreements that we've signed? Is that going to violate confidentiality agreements? Are you able to actually use some of your clients' or your partner's data or even your company data, whatever it may be, in these bots? Also, what if you are working with someone and your company has hired you or hired your company and you're using AI to create a lot of work product? Well, do you have to disclose that AI as a subcontractor since they're creating work? So these are things you need to talk with your legal team about. And then finally, and this kind of goes for all electronic stuff, just be aware it may come up in litigation. Has anyone ever been part of like that where like all of a sudden, like every email you've ever written is now kind of being shoved into that? Yeah, it happens. It happens, it's not uncommon.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's so great. All right, so for data privacy risks, you need to realize they're collecting a lot of information. All of these large language models, they need more data. They need it to be refined. So they're going to continue to incorporate data maybe that you've posted online, data that they're collecting when you go to visit it. So you need to know, all right, well, how is that data being, what is the data being collected? How is it being stored? How is it being accessed? Who are they sharing it with? So again, this is where those are the questions that you need to ask before you just blindly be like, oh, we can just plug this in and now we can have our AI chatbot doing customer service support or whatever. In terms of what should you be putting into AI? What should you be sharing? Well, there is a heuristic out there, if you wouldn't be willing to kind of post it on Reddit, then you probably shouldn't be putting it into an AI bot. But again, this is where you're going to need to really closely collaborate with your legal team to go and read the terms of service of whatever AI products you may be using, whatever you're using on the back end. Know, all right, can you opt out of things? Do you have to pay? Whatever it may be. There's lots of different scenarios. It will lie to you confidently and without remorse. So you need to just be careful of that. So don't assume that AI-generated information is true. And don't just blindly start putting it in your product like this company did. Like, oh, you know what? We don't have to do the translations anymore. AI is going to do that for all of us. So whoever we are paying to do our translations, it's gone. Now all of a sudden they get these results showing up in their products and they look pretty ridiculous. So just as a general rule, make sure you're validating the responses. I generally, my kind of recommendations is if you're starting to use it, start to use it just on internal workflows and internal work processes. Use it as an initial draft But if you start using it externally, that's going to need a higher level of vetting and validation, because it's very easy for you to start making, taking information from AI, putting it out there for the public, and then that ends up having damage to your brand and to you as a product person. There's lots of disinformation risks. And again, this might seem like, oh, this isn't going to happen to me. No one's going to deep fake my image or voice. But it will happen. Have you guys heard about this thing now? Like my wife and I, we have code words. I'm like, hey, if anyone calls you and says they've kidnapped me and they need you to wire money, ask them what the password is. Because it sounds crazy, but somebody just lost $1 million in New York City doing this, So you do need to be aware of that from a corporate perspective as well, because it's very, you may have something like, I don't know, just as a prank, they may show oh my gosh, look, I opened up this product at HEB and look what I found inside, a dead mouse or something. So there's these things that can be easily faked right now. So you need to kind of be aware of that. And then also, these are these tools can be used for good or evil. And it's very easy for one bad actor to just target a company and actually just go after them. You remember those crazy rumors about Wayfair and stuff, and how all of these there was these nutty rumors going about them? Well, all of those could be supercharged by using AI bots and things like that. And this is just an example I pulled from at Amazon, where people were doing fake reviews. And you can start to see all right, now you have to be conscious. If you're a company that's letting people reviews and people might want to game the system, know that that might be subject to some disinformation. Discrimination is another one. And this is one area where, okay, this is a product manager. You have an ethical responsibility to make sure that you are not creating things that are going to perpetuate, discrimination. So you need to understand that what is the data that the AI is being trained on, and then how users also, what is it called? I think it's called antagonistic training. You can actually, if you actually open up your underlying data and training so to allow people to add to it, it doesn't take much for them to start skewing the results. So bad actors will kind of flood in data to start kind of manipulating your overall model to kind of produce results that are either bad for your company, discriminatory, or whatever it may be. So your tools need to be transparent. They need to be explainable, which can be really tough, because sometimes you ask these large language models, well, how did it come up with that answer? And they can't really tell. But you should be able to be open enough. You should follow certain guidelines. There are models and approaches to creating AI. Has anyone ever heard of constitutional AI? Our goal is to be honest and helpful. So you as a product manager, you need to think, do you guys ever see that show Black Mirror? It's where technology goes wrong. You need to think about, for my product, if I use AI, what is the Black Mirror episode that could result from this? Yeah, there's a lot. So some examples of discrimination. Amazon had an AI product where they were trying to automate and really improve their hiring practices, and they created an AI tool to do that. Unfortunately, the underlying data had a lot of just implicit bias in it. And what it ended up doing, it was wildly discriminating against women based on the underlying training data. So they ended up pulling that and eliminating it. There was also another example in a book, what is it? The I Love You and You Are a Thing. It's all about how people create bots. And there was an example of a company that was building recommendation engines and using AI to help match you up with babysitters and things like that. Again, it was just straight up, not only discriminatory, it was just racist. So you have to be very careful about that. This is an example here where you can see the prompt it gave. Give me a function to tell me about a good engineer based on race and gender. So, and that's oh, well, you just need a white dude. Well, as a former programmer, I violate this terribly. So these are very simple discrimination examples. This can happen very easily. You also need to be aware of intellectual property infringement. This is kind of like the Wild West. I think that there's going to be a lot of legal, regulatory, there's going to be a lot of lawsuits. I don't know how this is going to shake out. But understand, if you are gathering and using information from AI, it could end up being something where you're infringing on some IP. So I put up this example, not just because it's a really freaky picture that it's a little bit of nightmare fuel, but you can see AI actually created it, and it has that Getty logo on it, because they're like, oh, that's what we saw with a lot of our training data. So Getty was like, yeah, that's not cool. Why are you using our stuff to build this? Well, you could also have someone where you describe a logo that already exists, that's part of the training data, and it builds something out. The other thing is you can actually, it may spit out some text, some copyright, some like protected IP, is paraphrases or actually just is verbatim of things that are already protected. So you need to be, again, be very careful that you're not infringing on copyright. All right, so we raced through that first section. Now we get in, well, I know that's kind of like I'm making you eat your vegetables. Now, let's get into the main meal and dessert. So how can you as a product manager, being aware of those things, just be better at your job? Well, here's some best practices. You're gonna have to meet and collaborate with your legal team. Now, it's not up to you to kind of figure out all of these complexities around all of the different legal things that could happen with AI or compliance or regulatory issues, but it is your job to make sure that you are reaching out to the experts and hopefully making sure that they're staying on top of it. Does anybody here work at a company where you have already been giving guidance in terms of how to use AI and when to kind of consult and what you can and can't do? See, just a few people, very, very few. Is anybody here at a company where they're like, just don't use it at all? See, is that's the policy? See, I don't like that policy. I've worked with a lot of in-house attorneys. If you kind of get them involved early, you're less likely to get those ones that are just in total CYA mode where they're like, we're just gonna cover our ass and just say no to everything. You don't want to do that. That's going to make your job as a product manager really hard. But if you work with them early, show them what you do, show that you are conscious of the risks and that you want to make sure that you're doing right by the company and that you're just trying to drive value for the business, not do things in a way that's reckless, you're more likely to get them away from that CYA mode. I do think that it's important for you to stay up to date. We'll talk a little bit about how you can do that. Who would say that they're looking and kind of reading and playing around with AI on a daily basis? All right, about half the people, that's great. All right, and you're gonna need to pair with them to kind of do the risk assessments. The big thing, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, of keep a human in the loop. If you're just copying and pasting and just integrating AI and being like, all right, there you go, you're gonna run into issues. So you have to have somebody where, all right, who is checking this? Who is validating that this is correct? Who is making sure that this meets our standards for our company? This is one where somebody wrote a book. I mean, good on this person who's trying to write a book and make a bunch of money off of it by having AI write it. They need to at least go through and make sure that they catch very obvious things like that. But I've heard already stories where product people have gotten into trouble. One where it's they went and one of their jobs, every time there was a release, that they had to put out the release notes. And they're like, this is a job for AI. And they copied and pasted all the stuff in there and convert all of this into release notes. Then they copied and pasted that and sent that out, and it was available to 50,000 of their partners. And it included a lot of stuff in there that was not public facing. And it was, the company had egg on their face, and the product manager was not in good graces with the CPO. I also heard a story where a product manager was given an assignment and to do research on a particular nonprofit, not knowing that the person who actually gave them this work to kind of prepare for this meeting actually helped found that nonprofit. And the research came back, the AI just confidently went in and made up all this fake information, and it turned out not to be true. So I've had lots of people tell me about stories like that, and it's happening already. So again, don't get caught in this. Use AI to get better at your job, but make sure that you're not just blindly listening to everything it says. When you start to incorporate and figure out, all right, well, how can I leverage this? You need to think about what are the responsible use cases for this. And here's some questions that you need to ask. All right, does it really solve a user problem? Is this going to make this better for the customer? and is it going to help drive the business? Don't just do it just because it's a cool thing to do. You can do plenty of like opportunities and tinkering outside to kind of get up to speed. You can build your own chatbots. You can do your own integrations. There's lots of great like no code tools out there where you can kind of ramp up. But don't do it just because it's a cool thing to do. Make sure it's giving you a competitive edge. And then also, again, from a business perspective, understand, is this feasible? Does this make sense? What is the ROI? Can I show this? Is this going to reduce the number of support tickets that we get in? Or is this going to reduce the time for closure for our support tickets? What are the use cases that we would use it? Does anyone find themselves just getting like directives from on high from the executives like, we need to use AI, go do something? Does anyone just kind of like there's excitement at the company just to do it but not really know why? Oh, that's good. Because like one of my concerns is like leadership has these expectations that it's going to transform the business and they want to just kind of go straight to fifth gear, but that's, there's issues with that. And then properly set expectations. So this is because like Claude is another, it's kind of like a similar tool to like ChatGPT, and it now integrates with Slack. And when you go to first use it, this is what they kind of give you that warning, like, hey, this is who we are. We're trying to be helpful, harmless, and honest, but know that, here's some of the risks of using this. So you may have to kind of, if you're in a B2B space and you're working with partners, your clients, and they're using some of this AI, you might need to say like, all right, this is how we're using it. This is where like your data might be leveraged. This is how we're trying to improve our service to make your lives easier. And you probably need to get them to sign off on this, some sort of disclaimer. But being open and honest, making sure that your terms of service, your privacy, all of those legal documents are up to date. But I really believe that you have to be open and transparent about it. Like, I would even like disclose, we're gonna get to the point, I believe, that you're gonna think about like, all right, well, not is this being generated by AI, but what is the underlying model that's driving this? Because you may just, for your business or I don't know, whatever it may be, you're like, I actually trust this more than I trust this model over here. So everyone kind of just uses ChatGPT as kind of like a blanket like overview, kind of like the way we talk about, well, in the South, Coke just means all soda, I feel like that's what's happening now with ChatGPT. You also need to make sure you're going and you can't just plug and play. You have to make sure that it's working the way you expect. You have to go in and regularly test things. You need to monitor what the output is. Hopefully you've set some success metrics. You've set some goals that you hope to achieve by leveraging AI, and make sure that that's happening. So that constant evaluation. And again, I think with a level of transparency so that people know, not only people are using it, but your partners are aware of it. But why do we kind of have all of those best practices? Because it really comes down to the reputational risk. You want to drive the business, but you want to do it in a way that's not going to end up kind of backfiring. Like, do you remember when Google rolled out Bard and they immediately had the Hubble telescope thing was wrong, and then they got knocked for that. They actually damaged their stock price. So that was like a minor case, and they've obviously recovered from that. But you've spent all this time, not only as a product person, developing your reputation, kind of being seen as someone who can get things done, someone who can be relied upon. If you go too fast and you aren't aware of the risks, you could end up getting in pretty bad shape. And same thing with your company. It takes a lifetime to build that reputation, but only a moment to lose it. So why is this critical for your career? So this, again, it's an inflection point. This is a really big moment that we're at, not only for product people, but technology in general. You need to really seize this, and I can't stress this enough. But I also want you to say, not only in terms of leveraging up your skills and continue to master your craft, but also to show your company and other potential companies that you're a leader and that you have that curiosity and drive to understand, be up to date, and kind of utilize them to drive customer experience and your business. Also, I will tell you, when I was a product leader at different companies, and I saw product people that it's great that they're focused on the end user, but I also needed product managers who were thinking strategically, who understood the risk and how that they were going to drive the overall business. If you could show the leadership that you have that mentality and that you are going to reach out and talk to legal to make sure you're doing things the right way, same thing with compliance, HR maybe, it's going to be really important. But if you go to the AI exchange and like join there for like $90, you get into their local, their community. There's tutorials. There's lots of people. Their Slack community is amazing. You will find out as soon as something's interesting and you want to hear what other people's perspectives are, it is just a great community to go to. So highly recommend the AI Exchange. It's actually one of the founders, graduated from UT. She now lives in San Francisco, and her sister also is one of the founders, also from UT. Both young, incredibly smart, and incredibly plugged into what's going on in the AI space. I don't think product managers are going anywhere. I think a lot of it will be automated. I think that maybe like, as a product manager instructor, I see so many PMs that are just so overwhelmed. I'm hoping that these tools will then give people the time back so they can actually spend more time in the market, talking to people, going out where the problems are, rather than just spending 95% of their time doing internal meetings. So I think it's going to make you more efficient as a product manager. If it takes your job as a product manager, I don't think AI is going to replace product managers. I think the PMs who lose their jobs they're going to be replaced by PMs that really know how to leverage AI.